Hey guys, this is Andy with Troglodyne, here with George again. Today we're doing part 2 of the series that we talked about yesterday. This one is Codes of Comfort.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of these codes of conduct, these employee handbook there's several things they call them, but the point is the content of them rather than just the nature of them, like we discussed in the last video, can also be troublesome for your organization in that it promotes something that is actually harmful for people getting emotionally invested in your firm and in the culture at your firm. And that's essentially trying to build too much comfort with who the people they actually are. I mean, yes, you're going to need to be accepting of people and all those sorts of diversity things everybody's heard, 600 times from other people and us. But the point is that the comfort zone where people are with who they are is not necessarily what's going to be useful to your firm.
Right. What they need to become eventually comfortable with is not necessarily who they are as they're going in, but who the company needs them to be.
Yeah, and that is going to require you actually getting them outside of their comfort zone, and probably
even if just for a while, even if it's just during an initiation phase, and then the comfort comes later.
Or say even during the job interview, trying to filter for the right mindset at that point. Right. There's lots of ways you can do this, but the big thing is that if you sort of have inside of your code of conduct the idea that people need to be respected as they are, without any kind of effort to earn that kind of respect, as if they, sprang forth from the forehead of Zeus.
Perfectly formed.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of having to put in their dues and essentially do the right thing to understand how things work, then they'll feel like they're just not going to be invested. And that's where imposter syndrome comes from. That's where a lot of these different sort of inferiority complexes come from, where you're immediately accepted, but you didn't actually have to do anything to be accepted at the
right
firm.
And so you're not emotionally invested because it didn't feel like you had to do anything to get it. And so as such, the achievement is devalued to nothing.
Yeah, it's hollow. It's why a lot of people, they value products that have a ritual associated with it.
Well,
it's
why,
an extra cost,
It's why in, say, the U.S. Army, even though they have rather grueling training regimens, which honestly, if they just took another month, wouldn't have to be so grueling at all,
and would probably be more effective.
But it would not inculcate the mindset that they're trying to get out of their people.
Yeah, because you can have physical standards, and to get actual physical fitness, it takes a lot of time no matter what. And just really hitting it very fast, very hard up front can actually be damaging, especially when you get injuries. But the fact is that the ordeal is what actually makes people mentally fit to overcome the sort of hardship implied in the job.
Well, especially for say like a combat scenario, you're going to go into those situations where, yeah, suddenly there is a do or die moment. So you kind of need to be prepared for that. So in that context, it makes perfect sense why they're trying to get you out of that comfort zone, because of what they're about to put you into.
Yeah, and when it comes to business and especially succeeding in small firms, it's sort of like there's been this Venn diagram that's very popular, where it's like where the magic happens and your comfort zone, and those two circles don't intersect, right? Especially when it comes to getting in customer mindsets and getting in the mindsets of your fellow coworkers, a lot of whom are very different from you. That is going to require you to get outside of your comfort zone, and it's going to require you to have a very open mind about things. And it's troublesome. Sometimes people don't have an open mind back, but those people should be filtered out, hopefully, by your hiring process and all these ordeals that come through.
Or if it's for a customer, by your marketing process.
Yeah.
You can target specific types of customers, but in the end, there's also going to be the kind of effect where customers find novel and interesting ways to use your product that you never anticipated, which is like, it's one of the greatest feelings to have, that, hey, your customer actually did this with your product and you never even thought they would. But at the same time, supporting that sort of thing can be uncomfortable.
Oh,
but
yes.
It's one of those, it can also be very lucrative. So
yeah.
Which should we care about, right?
Yeah, we should care about what advances, the business and advances our own interests as, an organization and things like that. And what we're trying to say here essentially is that any kind of thing that you consider adopting as especially a mandatory policy, you should really think long and hard about what that's going to do with regard to inculcating the kind of emotional investment you need in a firm for employees to actually succeed and be enthusiastically compliant with the goals of the firm, because that's the whole point, is you have to make people pull forward without having to be whipped, you know?
Right, right. But that at the same time, emotional investment as a process is not something that comfort is the only thing that's necessary to get that. It's one of the tools in the toolbox, but it's in fact not the best tool in your toolbox, especially going up front and especially as it regards the creative process, which in a development organization is very crucial. The creative process is pretty much your entire bag, other than say making sure that you use tools to ensure that it's syntactically correct, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Basically following the rules of the road. But
yeah, I can certainly talk to you about sort of some examples in my past that I've seen of this, especially when it comes to hacking emotional investment and things like that. If you're trying to impose standards, using things like linters and automated tools are almost always preferable, because people, they will get upset with rules unless they're applied by something that is literally unthinking, and a computer, everyone knows it's impartial. Nobody really gets too upset about the rules when there's that one layer of abstraction between the person who actually wrote the rule in the first place and the thing that's actually enforcing it. People have this magical feeling about the way software works, and instead of understanding, no, it's just there because this dude wrote it and put it in there, you know?
well, and which is kind of funny because this is even true when you're a software developer.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. You would think that people would be aware of the process when they're actually doing the exact same thing, but not necessarily. It's really easy to fall into that mental trap.
But no, while we're casting runes, we also are affected by heap big medicine.
Oh yes, yes. This is absolutely the truth. That said, the other thing that I've seen a lot of times is when you're doing code reviews. A lot of times, this sort of culture of excessive respect, especially unearned, can be very harmful during the code review process. I've seen a lot of things where people, they just don't want to make a code review comment, even though they really should at that point, because, well, there's just not a rule for this, so I can't push back on this or somebody might get upset. Well, the fact is, during review, you have to be savage sometimes. I'm just going to say this outright, okay?
Well, especially with considering the audience, some people need that sort of feedback for them to grow. And if they're honest with themselves, they will solicit it from the reviewer if they're not feeling like they're getting enough feedback like that. I've seen that several times, and in fact, I've asked this of reviewers myself several times, because like I myself, I'm pretty thick-skinned. I will ask for rather harsh reviews just so that I can grow.
Yeah, you have to understand that some people, they value accomplishment more than they do validation, and those people tend to want that sort of savagery in a review and the uncompromising sort of position, as opposed to the person who values validation above accomplishment. They're going to want the very well-known praise,
correct praise kind of technique, where you say, hey, I noticed you did this looks very novel, that sort of thing, but are you sure that this is going to be the best tool for this? You can do this, that sort of thing. Anyways,
because people,
let's see about this.
Yeah, they want to feel that their approach was at least valid for the place their mindset was in before they get corrected, rather than say, well, something that is probably closer to the objective truth,
here's
like this never
way.
Could have worked,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When sometimes like that's what you want to say, it's what you feel you want to say, but if you know the person you're reviewing the code for, which that's one of the things you need to sound out. If say you're a reviewer for a new hire, something like that, or somebody you've never reviewed before, that's one of the things that some of the review questions that you're going to have to be are somewhat probing to figure out what their mindset is.
Yeah, and that takes some time going up front, but eventually you figure out who can really take the very quick stuff, and you can get mind meld with the other people you're working with, to where it's like the only code comment I need, for example, with my brother here on a lot of things, when I just see something, it's like, bruh, it's just, and then they see it and they're like, oh God, so it's sometimes it takes a while for you to understand the level of comfort people actually need with you. And a lot of that has to do with how much trust you've personally built with the other person. If you don't have a huge amount of trust with them, a lot of times it takes that kind of validation and comfort building up front before you can actually do what's necessary to convey the maximum amount of information in the minimum amount of time, which is what you actually need for productivity.
Yeah.
You know, this sort of comfort seeking behavior and all that sort of stuff, and the quest for validation, it doesn't actually get anything done. It's just sort of things we have inside of our brain that have to get out of the way before we are actually going to allow ourselves to be productive.
Right. Where in reviews, especially this sort of comfort building thing, though necessary, it does get in the way a lot of the times, especially for personal growth, that sort of thing. I've seen people definitely like hold back, like I was saying earlier, until I say, hey man, you don't need to hold back. Yeah. And it's depressing to kind of have to ask that, but at the same time I understand that other people aren't mind readers as well. So whenever you're also learning or you're taking review commentary, be aware that your reviewer as well is not going to necessarily understand, especially, hey, we're developers here, we understand that computer go blip blop, but we don't necessarily know that meat brain goes squish squash. So
not most programmers are totally clueless about these sorts of things. It's just the facts of life.
Yeah.
So why they got into computers? I mean,
well, and it's not something that's even necessarily surprising because of specialization, that sort of thing. There's only so much time in the day. So considering the audience is both important from the reviewer standpoint and from the person who is soliciting reviews of code, and really trying to go for comfort and that sort of thing, while important in some contexts, is not necessarily always the thing that you want to be cultivating.
Yeah, and again, this is not to say comfort is not valuable. There's a reason people have gone to these approaches in their codes of conduct, is because they understand that, yes, at some level you do need comfort because it has to get out of the way before people will let themselves be productive. But you have to understand that if you never get out of the comfort building phase, you're in the no productivity zone.
Yeah, which is why typically, especially if it's a group of developers that are all in the same city, they go to the same office, that sort of thing. This is typically why, say, going to the bar or doing some sort of event where you get to, drink with each other, see that sort of thing, that can act as a razor for building comfort. Where
it's a big accelerant.
You get them to loosen up. You get them to actually
be vulnerable around each other,
that sort of thing. Mostly due to libation, you're lowering their amount of inhibitions, to be quite frank.
Well, they see each other and their own failings as human beings, and they realize, okay, this is a real guy. I can not worry about it.
Or on the other hand, they realize he can't actually handle himself and is kind of cuckoo. But
but then those people get filtered out fairly quickly thereafter.
Right. Yeah. But that's what we're trying to say, is these types of comfort building activities can actually be done outside of the review process for the most part.
Yeah.
And then once you've gotten that out of the way, you can pretty much just consider, okay, what are they biased towards, and tailor your review commentary as such, whether it means you need to be absolutely savage with this guy because that's what's going to help him grow, or you need to couch it in some praise, that sort of thing, and then you can just move on from there.
Yeah, and certainly there's some people that the only thing that's going to motivate them is not comfort, because they're already plenty comfortable and they actually need a swift kick.
Yeah, especially if you have employees that say, they're somewhat in the doldrums, something like that. They seem to be, just lagging for some reason. Good kick in the ass sometimes is what's needed.
Yeah, and that's sort of what we're getting to here. Probably you don't actually need a code of conduct. It would probably be better if you actually just left these things unstated, because like we're saying here, you need flexibility. Some people are going to be motivated by comfort. Some people are not. Okay. And so you need to understand that and essentially just say, look, we're going to treat each other with like the bare minimum of dignity and like legal standards. And otherwise it's like, look, we're coworkers and we're familiar with each other. We may or may not be friends. We may or may not even like each other, but the fact is we're all here to work, and whatever we need to do to get the ship moving forward is what we ought to do, regardless of whether that is necessarily the most respectful thing to do at the moment. Right. Sometimes you need some tough love.
Right, because ultimately when it comes to human relationships, which is what we're talking about here, whether it's a workplace relationship or whatever, those types of things are not determined by words on paper. No. You can write as pretty a prose, as pretty of codes of conduct as you want, but ultimately what's going to matter is the interaction between human and human.
Yeah.
You can have some guidelines and that sort of thing, but it's never going to be perfect. So in many ways, the one of the advices that you can get that actually is quite right is that why are you bothering codifying them when
It can't be. It's
it
always
can't
going
be.
to be up for interpretation. Okay.
Exactly.
The British approach to never having a written constitution is actually pretty wise in this regard, because it doesn't matter. Nobody's really going to read it anyways, and if they do read it, they're going to think it means what they want it to mean.
Well, right, and this sort of thing you can see in many judiciaries today, where even though you have laws on paper, you have things like precedent, like with British common law, where it's like, well, okay, there may be a statute that says this, or there may not be, but for the most part, this guy says this, and this stood in court several times, so we're going to do this instead.
Yeah, and when you look at what's most durable over time, it is things like common law, which are based on essentially pragmatism. Well, what works, and that's basically where you need to go with whatever your corporate culture is, and what you actually value as an organization is, well, whatever works. And if something isn't working, that's when you actually need to take action. But if it's working fine, then don't bother with it, and you don't actually need to write it down or anything like that. Just keep on trucking out there, and don't bother with don't sweat any of this stuff, is what I'm saying. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and don't sweat hitting the like and subscribe buttons there, and please donate and hire us for a contract if you're interested. All right, guys, bye.